we are on the River Severn. A couple of years ago, going up and down the river, Andy and myself realised, having spent time talking to people who've not actually gone up and down the Severn on their narrowboats in Tewkesbury, that a lot of people are quite put off by the thought of going down the Parting. It's got all sorts of rumours about how dangerous it is and so on. So we're now on the Severn. As you come down the Severn, you come to a point 3.5 miles above Gloucester, and the first thing you actually see as you come round the corner in the distance is the chimney to the tile works, and the tile works just to the right of it and an electric cable behind it. We're now sort of 250 metres from the tile works itself, where we'll take a left turn. And as you look at the river, as we're going over the top of it, we're actually on the top end of the tide. The debris field has just gone ahead of us, and we're just picking up the dregs that's flotsam that's floating down behind. About 200 yards ahead, you can see the left turn. The river itself is going to break into two there, and the left part is the Parting. And just on the right, on the far bank, you see the sign, needs a wash, that tells you not to go to the right because there's a weir, and there's also protection to stop you going over the weir, as the main right-of-way is down to the left. And this is actually the start of the Parting, and you look to your left and you can actually see the brickworks, which you can see from a mile further up the river, which gives you an indication. But also at this point, if you look at the river on either side, as we go into the Parting, there's quite a muddy bit on each side, and it always catches the big logs, so you have to be quite careful here that you don't run onto something. On the right now, there's a big tree just submerged, and on the left, you can see a few of the bits sticking out. We've now made our left turn. You don't want to be any closer to the left bank because it's quite shallow. You see Jane, the Dutch barge. And what we have to do from this point on is increase the speed. So we're going a little bit faster than the river. So in actual fact, we've got control and steerage, what they call steerage. Now, as we're going down this channel, there are a few simple rules. And I think the first thing is to know you should stay on the right-hand side or the centre of the river to the right-hand side, as the people coming up should also stay on the right-hand side, centre to the right-hand side. As we're going downstream, because we're going a little bit faster than the people coming upstream, if there was to be a problem, the people coming upstream need to ease off. In fact, they have a duty to ease off and allow you to go by, because simply you can't stop. The weight of the boat's moving, you're doing about 4 knots, and it would take you 200 or 300 yards to stop, and in that time you would probably have had an accident. So a little bit of care is needed from this point on. You can also see, although it's been cut back last year, the channel itself is quite narrow, whereas last year the bushes on either side came in and it left you with about 12 yards in the centre of the river. I've just increased the speed a little bit, a small amount. We're now doing about 1400 revs to give a little bit more control and increase the steerage over the barge itself. On the right you can see the branches of the trees leaning over the river, and you can imagine both sides last year were much worse than that. Well, we just passed the trees leaning into the right there, and the river now opens up, or the cut opens up, and it looks quite big, but as you get closer into either the left or the right side, it does shallow out. So if you stay in the middle third, generally most of the time you're on the right side. If you look at the cut on either side, what you see is the water appears to be stationary. Well, it is. We're actually on the top of the tide. It's just gone through the debris field, and it's starting now to lose, and the speed will increase. In fact, if you look at the bushes on the right-hand side, you can see the water starting to move the leaves underneath them. So it gives you some idea that it will get a little bit quicker as we get lower down. We now have about 3 miles to the docks. Don't forget, be aware, you're looking to the front and concentrating, looking over the bows, but also you need to look behind as well, because occasionally people do try and overtake on smaller boats, which makes life difficult for everyone. Now, as we're just moving into the trees now, you get some idea of what it was like last year. The left side's been cut away and the right side is more or less as it was. Goes to make it quite interesting, I think. Total time for the 3.5 miles going down towards the Gloucester Lock is usually about 35 minutes. Coming back up, it's a little bit longer because, of course, most of the time you're going against the current. But once again, if you look where we are now, the river appears to be almost still, although it has turned. It takes a little while for it to go down and for the water speed to pick up, which we'll see in perhaps the next 20 minutes. We're now about a mile, perhaps a mile and a half down the parting, and the first real sign of Gloucester is the Chinese restaurant in the pile-driven bank on the port side, on the left side. And also, we're coming into a corner, so you always have to be a little bit careful. Maintain your speed, keep your steerage, stick to the centre, to the right-hand side of the river, the street, the cut itself. And you should be absolutely fine. And if you're watching the film now, you'll see how we get around this particular problem. You see, the bend itself appears to be almost 90 degrees. So as we're coming into it, I start to ease on the rudder, and you can see the bows going to your starboard side as we turn in the corner. And there's very little effort to actually turn, as long as you've got sufficient speed for steerage, which is what we've got. Now, if I ease a little bit more on the rudder to bring the stern round, you can see how quick we do actually respond. And the corner goes on and on and on. And on the right side, you don't want to be too close to the right, because it is just a little bit shallow there. If you get too close, you can actually hear the note of the propeller and the engine change, the propeller getting close to the bottom. Puts a weight on the engine and causes it to work, and the engine slows down. But as we are at the moment, we're absolutely fine. And the corner still carries on going around to the right side. If you look carefully and look at the water in the cut, you can actually see the little bits of leaves and trees and branches moving, and that gives you an indication of how fast it's going. We've just gone off the tide, so as we go further down, it will get a little bit faster. But the speed we're doing now is absolutely fine. We're doing about 1400 revs, and I should imagine we're doing perhaps 4 or 5 knots. Which, once again, it's important to maintain your steerage so you have control. Now we've just actually gone over some debris and a couple of logs, and what I did was, just before we got there, was take the boat out of gear, stop the propeller turning, just in case there was anything and it was likely to foul the propeller, and everything's okay now. And just increase the revs ever so slightly, There are 2 or 3 sets of pylons, cables going across the cut, the parting as it is. And what we normally do is just record the time between each one, so that when you go back, at least you know where you are in the parting, how far along the 3.5 miles you are until you get to the top, or either down to Gloucester Docks, which is useful. And there's also a situation in about 5 or 10 minutes time where at one of the road bridges you have to ring into the lock to let the lockmaster know where you are in the parting, so he can then open the gate or tell you to hold back or fasten onto the wharf just as you come down, depending on how busy he is. But we took 10 minutes off doing that, so we'll hang back there for a while. Once again, if you look at the film, you can see the trees on either side. This time last year, those trees were actually almost all the way, apart from the middle third. And for 2 boats to pass, not knowing what's on either side and how deep it was and how far the branches actually came into the centre, was a bit disconcerting, to say the least. What you might make a note of is that if you look at the banks, say on the starboard side there, occasionally you see the odd tree poking out from the riverbed, and it might be 3 or 4 metres out from the bank. So you can imagine if a big sort of Dutch barge was coming up and you were coming down, and you moved over a little bit too far to your right, you could end up in trouble. So keep middle to the right hand side. Give yourself plenty of room by, if you're going around the left hand corner, move over to the right, and that gives you a second or 2 seconds more view round the corner to actually see what's coming in to react to it. Now we're now coming over, just about going under the first road bridge, and that means we're only 10 minutes from the lock itself. Hi, Gloucester Lock, it's Frank Barton again, Wye Invader Two. We've just come under the first road bridge. Thank you very much. See you shortly. Ta. We've just had the all clear from the lockmaster and the gates are open, so we now have about 10 minutes. And once again, if you look at the river, I keep saying river, it's this part of the River Severn, I suppose, the cut, it's almost as though the water has been held back and we're on the slack water, which makes it a lot easier if you can get yourself here just after high water and go down on the ebb. It hangs back and it's almost like being on the canal itself or a canal. There's very little movement. In fact, we just gone over a log. Whoops. Quite a big log. Hi, Frank Barton again. We just come under the bridge, and have you got anybody in the parting? Because as you come under the bridge on the left-hand side, there's a tree partly submerged, about 20 foot long, and it's on the right side looking downstream. Yeah. Well, it's floating. It's sort of floating. It's making its own way down. Yeah. All right. I'll see you shortly. Thank you. Bye. If, whilst you're coming down the parting and you do come across a log or something like that floating down, we're only half a mile from the lock, and it's helpful to the lockmaster if you actually get on your phone or on your VHF and just give an indication of what the obstruction is in the water. I mean, what we've just gone over was a 20-foot log, partly submerged, probably about a foot through the middle. Well, with a plastic boat, I should imagine you could do yourself a lot of damage, whereas a narrow boat's a little more substantial. We've now increased the revs. We've spoke to the lockmaster. There are no other boats in the parting, so there's no reason at all why we shouldn't get a move on. In fact, we've only got 10 minutes to go anyway. And you see the second road bridge coming up, just about to go under it, and also the pile-driven bank. And the corner turns around to the right-hand side there, and then sharp left once we've gone through the bridge. just spoke to Andy again to see if we can get a better shot of the water itself. It is almost slack, even though the tide's on the way out, which always makes it a lot easier, a little bit more pleasant, rather than having to struggle to come down when you're doing sort of 6 or 7 knots and the spring tide's going out. Whereas this is almost a pleasure. Now we can just see the approach to the lock and the right turn, and as soon as we get round the corner you'll see the lock in front of us, and the guy on it, the lockmaster, is actually going to open it so we can actually go straight in. On the right hand side you can see where some of the bank work is still going on, clearing back the trees, and it does make a difference. It gives you a lot more clearance and makes you feel a lot more secure. You can actually see if anybody's coming towards you now, whereas you couldn't before. If you look over onto the right, you can see the instructional notice board. All craft to the left, and that's not to the right, not over the weir, to the left and into the lock chamber, which we'll see just in about 2 minutes' time. If you come down here and the gates are closed, on the left-hand side, all down the old quay or wharf there, you'll see a series of chains, and you can actually moor onto them and wait until the traffic signal changes to green, and then move forward, progress into the lock once it's clear. Now we're just about to get the view, and as it opens up, it's on, the traffic lights are on red, but he did say come in, so I should imagine it changes as we get down there. We've now got a green. In fact, the lockmaster did say, when I spoke to him a few minutes ago, just to come straight in. But it's always as well to go with the lights as well. It's always a bit of a rush. When you're coming into the lock, if you're not careful, the current tries to drag you around the pillar and down into the sluice in the weir on the right hand side. So I always put a little bit of speed on, get in, and then slow down. And as you see, we go across to the right, but if the current's coming down, what it does is sometimes it comes into the lock, and you think you can get to the right, and without a bow thruster you pretty much end up where the current takes you. So I chose to then go across onto the port side on the left. Andy was ready with his mooring rope. As soon as he secured the bows, I then put it in forward gear, locked the rudder over and put the stern against the left side of the lock, and then put my rope through. And we're secure now, waiting for the water to lift. In fact, we're on our way up. Yesterday when we came down to go up to Tewkesbury, there was 5 boats in here and a queue outside. Today, there's no one. We didn't pass anyone coming down, and I don't think there's anybody waiting to come in, so it looks like a much quieter day. Not quite so busy.
Temperature hasn't gone up, the amps have gone up, and that's it. Yeah.
Well, that's it. That's your 3.5 miles of parting. 3.5 miles of the River Severn that's got a reputation. And today, when you look at it with the tide being held back, it's backing up, all the trees cut back off either side, and it looked fairly straightforward. But I think you have to remember that you have the right side, the other person coming up has the right side. You both go from the middle to the right, and if you're coming downstream, the person coming upstream has to give consideration to you, because he can stop. And there's one other sort of little twist of the tail, that if you ring and speak to the lockmaster and he tells you there's a commercial boat coming up that's constrained by draft, he has the right to all the deep navigational channel. So you don't want to be in there if that's the situation. So it's always as well to get on the VHF or get on your mobile phone, ring Gloucester Lock, find out what's in before you go down, and enjoy the 3.5 miles, because you know you're safe, you know you can do it, and you've got a little more confidence, I think, and I hope that actual time film will help when we put it online.